Okay, the topic is Urim V'Tumim. This week's Pasha discusses the clothing of the Kohanim. One of the details that's recorded about the clothing of the Kohanim was that the high priest wore 8 garments. The 4 garments that the conventional Kohen wore, right? He wore the pants and the tunic and the gadol, which was 32 amos long and ran around him, and a hat. And in addition, he had 4 what's called bnei-Yisra'el of gold, garments of gold. He had a second tunic, a second shirt, me'il, a tzitz, a head band, a head plate, and then he had, of course, the breastplate and the ephod, the apron, which he wore on his back. He didn't wear the apron on the front, as most people do. He wore it behind him. And the ephod and the el-choshen, the apron and the breastplate, were tied together into a single unit so they wouldn't budge. They were chained on top and tied tightly on the bottom. There's a special law that they're not allowed to budge. And as you'll see, and it's discussed in Sfarim, they're frequently described as a unit. Sometimes the ephod and el-choshen are called ephod. Sometimes the ephod and el-choshen are called el-choshen, and it's a reference to both together. In these meforshim that we're going to touch on, and then in the sikh at the end, it's conceivable that sometimes one without the other, but they shared properties. The essence of the ephod and el-choshen had many, many similarities. And in the breastplate, there was something called Urim V'Tumim. The literal translation of the words Urim means lights, and Tumim means holes, wholenesses with a W. Something that makes whole. And what is this? What is this Urim V'Tumim? And there's so many opinions, and there's so much to discuss. It's mamash anash and Ralbag. So first turn the page. Read the second page, pasuk lamed. Venatata al-choshen hamishpat. You should place el, to, right? El doesn't necessarily mean in. It could mean to. The breastplate of judgment, as a Urim v'Tumim. This phenomena called the light and the tumim that makes whole. Vehayu al-lev Aharon. They should be on the heart of Aharon. Bevo'o lifney Hashem as he approaches before God. Venasa Aharon, and Aharon should carry et-mishpat bney-Yisra'el, the judgment of the Jewish people, al-libo on his heart, lifney Hashem before God, tamid all the time. Now, very important initial commentary. The purpose of carrying the breastplate and the names of the 12 tribes and so forth with the Urim V'Tumim was to carry the mishpat bnei-Yisra'el. By the ephod, the apron had 2 stones on his shoulders, like shoulder pads. Each one had 6 names of the shvatim. It says lizikaron, that Aaron carried it to remember, as opposed to here it says as a judgment. And this nuance, he's carrying the names of the shvatim and carrying the names of the shvatim. One is for memory and one is for judgment, is significant, and it has to do with the Urim V'Tumim. The first thing we're going to read is the Yenis and Ben Azil. Turn back to the page we had first. That will be page Taf Shin Lamed Tes. I made the arrow. V'sita in b'choshen dina, you should place in the breastplate of judgment, Yas, turn the page again, Uraya, the lights, the menaharin mileihoin, whose words radiate. Umefarsim in tamid de v'Yisra'el, and reveal those secret things that relate to the Jewish people. V'yas tumaya, in addition to placing these lights which expose, you should place the tumaya. What is their function? They're mashlimin be'evadeh, and they make perfect and whole in their work. L'kahana rabba, to the high priest, that the tova that he is demanding and searching, ulfan, teaching, direction, min kadam ad Hashem, from before God, behind with the Urim V'Tumim, to the Urim enlighten and the Tumim complement, they perfect. The behind, because on the stones of the el-choshen mishpat was chokik, was carved in meforish and stated explicitly Shema Rabba V'Kadisha, the great and holy name of God. The bay is barium with which God created Tlas Me'ov Isarti Alma, the 310 worlds, which are for tzaddikim also beloved. The chokik mefarish be'evin shesiya, it's also carved and explicitly stated on the stone called Evin Shesiya, whatever they call it, the stone that the world was based on. The b'chosem more alma, with which the master of the world sealed. Pum tahei maraba, the mouth of the great abyss, means sheiruya. I think sheiruya means a flood, but I don't know. It says in Gemara that in the place of the Beis HaMikdash there's a hole to the abyss, and if the waters would rise, they'd flood the earth, and it's kept sealed by this Evin Shesiya. Any man who mentions this holy name, b'shas anika, a time of pain and oppression, mishtazeh will be helped, u'tmid and magalian, and secrets will be revealed to him. This breastplate, with the uraya which revealed to Maya which perfect, in the heart of Aaron, bisman me'ale kodam ad Hashem. At the time he went before God, v'yitel Aaron yazdin bney-Yisra'el al-libo. Aaron should take the judgment of the Jewish people on his heart, kodam ad Hashem, before God, to do it all the time. Very interesting. Now, we'll see Rashi in a moment. This is Urim V'Tumim. It was a miraculous phenomena that the el-choshen hamishpat provided access to secret information. Rashi, same page, right side. As the Urim V'Tumim says, Rashi Uksav Shema Mafurish. It's a document on which the exclusive name of Hashem was written. Shayanai's name was placed in the folds of the choshen. And this Urim V'Tumim, this plate of gold, which had the name of God written on it, acted as a battery, so to speak, through which the words would light up, and the Kohen would know messages from the Eibishter, u'mitamim devarav, and it would make the words whole. And Rashi continues and he says, they had the breastplate during the second temple, because Kohen Godol, the high priest cannot be missing one of the garments, but that plate with the divine name was missing, and therefore it didn't have this miraculous quality. That plate of gold with the name of God Almighty written upon it, which was in the fold of the choshen, is the reason why it's called mishpat. That there was a judgment, there was a clarification, there was a discernment or a discerning of phenomena which was affected by this breastplate because of the name of God which is inside. Now, they're actually saying more or less the same thing as the Yonatan ben Azil. He clarifies that it was a physical plate of gold with the name of Hashem written on it. He also seems to distinguish between the word Urim and Tumim. Right? He says Urim made light and Tumim made whole. They're two different things. And the more we learn, the more you'll see this. Now we get to the Even Ezra. And here the Even Ezra goes off the abyss. He goes off the continental shelf. What the Even Ezra says is very similar, really, to what Ralbag says. Ralbag is very elaborate and so forth. And I'll give you the gist of it. I'll give you the long and short of it. Even Ezra disagrees with Rashi completely. There's a bunch of bases for it. Even Ezra holds that there was more than one Urim V'Tumim. It wasn't unique to the Kohen Godol. There were many other people who had this Urim V'Tumim, who were able to predict the future and so forth. Some of them, he says, didn't have Urim V'Tumim. They had only Tumim. So that was sufficient to be prophetic to an extent, but since they had Tumim and not Urim, so there was a deficiency in their ability to predict the future. He links the Urim to the choshen and the Tumim to the ephod, as do the Makubalim. You'll see there's a lot of symmetry here. Everybody is saying the same thing in other words. You'll see mamish 10 different opinions, but they're really saying essentially the same thing. Urim is linked to the choshen, Tumim is linked to the ephod. Says Even Ezra, Urim V'Tumim were not unique to the Kohen Godol. It wasn't a name of God, as Rashi says at all, completely rejected. Based on a supposed letter from Rabbi Goen, which Ramban says, I saw Rabbi Goen's letter and he's wrong. Ramban says about Even Ezra's rejection of Rashi, he's wrong. Even Ezra rejects Rashi, and Ramban rejects Even Ezra's rejection. And he holds that Urim V'Tumim was really more a process than a phenomenon. It's very long. The evidence is very long. The Ralbag is almost as long. So I'll tell you the gist of what they both are saying. They both construe the Urim V'Tumim as facilitators, as tools for meditation. The essence of what they both say is, Even Ezra and Ralbag, is that Urim V'Tumim helped Kohen Godol be a prophet. Rashi holds, the Ezra holds, the Ramban holds that it was a miracle. They hold that there was nothing miraculous about Urim V'Tumim. The vTumim were assistants. They aided a Kohen Godol in becoming a prophet. What's the long and short of it? The long and short of it is this. Ramban holds, Torah holds, that in order for one to become a prophet, there's a whole series of steps. First of all, you need to be a pretty wholesome person to become a prophet. You need to be wise. Wise doesn't mean scholarly in Torah. Wise means human wise. In addition to knowing much Torah, you have to also know the secrets of the Torah, the humanities of the Torah, the transcendence of the Torah. You need to be humble. You need to be rich. We need to say you don't have any weaknesses, psychological and emotional and temptations and so forth. These are the prerequisites to prophecy. And then you have to certainly live a lifestyle. And the lifestyle has to do with isolation, with solitude, aloneness, and a lot of meditation. What do you meditate? On transcendence. There's reality, there's a lower reality, there's a higher reality. There's the core of reality that's called Teva Umasha Achri HaTeva. And people who wish to be prophets, first of all, had to be very wholesome human beings, great scholars, very healthy psychologically, very at peace with themselves, not in a compromised way, but in a whole way, in an achieved way. And then they would meditate. They would meditate on what's beyond. The meditation on what beyond was not prophecy, but it was more and more abstract. More abstract. And the abstraction affected the mind. The mind became a mind that's seeking and longing for the unknown, for the beyond. And then maybe she will give you a prophecy. Like Chokhmah. Chokhmah is a flash. The process of getting that flash is going past yourself. It's the frustration of not knowing. It's the admission that everything I've known till now is wrong. You want to go past yourself so that you can get something from on high. So they view Urim V'Tumim as physical tools, physical things that have pictures on them, perhaps, that were used to assist in a meditation. And the nature of the meditation was to go higher, to go past. Reality is not building a house. Reality is not earning money. Reality is not organic life. Reality is not even human existence. Reality is not even human intellect. It's angelic intellect and what is beyond. And to use the Urim V'Tumim as a vehicle, you look at it and it helps you go past the here and now to get closer to a higher there in some place and some other time, so that you were a keli for nevuah. That's how they describe Urim V'Tumim. Ibn Ezra writes, they took the Urim V'Tumim, they put him inside the breastplate. And when the Kohen needed to be a prophet, he took him out and looked at him.
Could you just step out for 1 second and give us what the relationship was? This going to come later. The Urim and Thummim to the Choshen.
Well, it's much later.
Okay.
Much later.
But physically, is there any physical...
None. We don't know yet what Urim V'Tumim are. According to Rashi, they're a plate with God's name on it that serve two purposes. One enlightened, one made whole. Both of them were in the breastplate. But for some reason, the Tumim had an association. Remember, I said this at the very beginning. In many contexts, the el-choshen and the ephod are viewed as one unit. There were two garments, but they were bound together inexorably. It was a lav de'iraisa that they should move. Chayv malchus. They had to be tied so tightly that like as if they were sewn together. They were one garment. And philosophically and certainly mystically, there's a link between the el-choshen and the ephod, and between the Urim and the el-choshen and Tumim and the ephod. But that's getting ahead of ourselves. Even Ezra brings a story from Tanakh, which Ramban also brings a sikh. At the back of this pamphlet, you have a sikh from the Rebbe, that there were a bunch of Kohanim who wore aprons, and that we find that people went to ask their counsel. And it's implicit that they had Tumim and not Urim. According to the Ibn Ezra and the Ralbag, that means they had one tool for the meditation of transcendence, but not the second tool for the transcendence. You follow what I'm saying? And both will tell you that Tumim are lower than Urim. In other words, first you meditated on Tumim, and then you could meditate on Urim. First you meditated on something which is not very physically real, but its level of being theoretical is closer to reality. And then you made it something which is even more theoretical, less related to reality, and closer to the transcendence, closer to what they would call acharei hateva, beyond nature, beyond any form altogether. And the idea of Urim V'Tumim was to help you become a Navi. So the Kohen Godol had to be a Navi, had to have Ruach HaKodesh, and the Urim V'Tumim assisted him. But it has nothing to do with the Rashi's concept, that it was like a battery. You put it inside and the lead light it up. They had no... The Gemara says what Rashi says. The Gemara says what Rashi says. In the back of this book, the Rebbe has a sikh on the Ramban. The Rambam is not the Ralbag. The Rambam is not the Ezra. But he's not that far away, where the Rebbe discusses the relationship between the Urim V'Tumim and the Kohen Godol, and yes Nevu and no Nevu and so forth. But this is their idea. Very interesting, and you and I will both agree we never heard of this before. And we're finished. Yeah? Now, so here's what we'll do. We'll do, mamish, a little bit of Ezra and a little bit of Ralbag. I printed 4 pages of Ralbag. A lot. But we'll just touch. So you have to go back to the first page. And you see the Ezra, it's huge. The first 2/3 of the Ezra are arguments to support the idea that Urim V'Tumim are not limited to the el-choshen. To prove that we have evidence from Tanakh that more than one person carried them. There was a fellow named Rabbi Yossi who wasn't a Kohen Godol. He wore tumim. He wore an ephod and tumim, no Urim. The 85 Kohanim who wore ephod bod had tumim and not Urim. Like I mentioned, there seems to be a uniformity in this, that Urim has a link to el-choshen and tumim has a link to ephod. A whole bunch of proofs. And he proceeds to discredit Rashi with 1,000 different ways. 2 lines from the bottom. That means that Rashi says, Urim V'Tumim were names of God Almighty. And that's it. That's all he says. Right? Rashi says Urim enlightened and Tumim made whole. And Ebenezer says, V'ilu ra tshuva zabeinu hai, lo omar kocha. Had Rashi seen Rabbeinu Hai Gaon's tshuva, he wouldn't have said so. Now, Rabbeinu Hai Gaon passed away the year Rashi was born. So Rashi should have been able to see his tshuva. Somehow Rashi didn't have access to it, maybe because he lived in a different part of the world. Rabbeinu Hai Gaon lived in Bavel. When he passed away, Bavel ended. Rashi lived in Europe. Rabbi Ebenezer was all over the place, suffering a miserable life that he had. And he says, the idea of the ephod v'choshen is a deep secret. I'll hint it a little bit, left side of the page. Now I want to tell you something. I told you a pshat in Ezra. I don't see it in Ezra. I really don't. Ramban sees it in Ezra. You understand what I'm saying? The Ezra is so obscure. Ramban says what Ezra says and explains Ezra better than Ezra himself and refutes it. Okay? Maybe a couple of smart Alex will get it. Okay. Now, the 2 chains that connected the el-choshen at the top, the chesha ve'ephod which connected the el-choshen at the bottom, this is a mished, it's a road to a central path. What does this mean? I don't have a clue. Okay, I have hunches, but I don't know. That's why there were 6 stones on each shoulder pad of the Kohen Godol, 1 on one and 6 on the other. And these shoulder pads that had the names of the 12 tribes on 2 stones correspond to the level of thought. Therefore, you had many tribes' names on 1 stone. Al-Mis bney-Yisra'el, on the numbers of Jews, Shmos kitil desam, and their names as they were born, V'kacha hashisha hashnim, the same is true on the other 6. Now, I'm going to tell you what I think this says, although this is very cryptic. He says the ephod was a place of unity. And it's represented by the notion of machshava. Now recall, I told you a while back that the ephod is linked to the word zikaron. Remember? el-choshen is linked to the word mishpat. The difference between zikaron and mishpat, when you remember something, you're not so concerned with discerning its aspects. You want to just recall the totality of it. The word judgment denotes to cut something up, to dissect, nituach, to chop it up. So he's observing Twice, the names of the 12 tribes appear in the garment of the Kohen Godol. But in one, each shevet got its own stone. In the other, they're merged, 6 on one and 6 on the other. So he's essentially saying that the oif represents a higher level, where we're not chopping things up, and therefore there's greater unity, and he connects it to the notion of thought, if you will, the way Hashem relates to us on a level of thought, where he isn't noticing our details, he's seeing our cohesion, our unity, as opposed to hamishpat, where we're chopped up, we're distinguished, we're separated from one another. Like hamishpat in any kifi achiluk b'leiv. When you come down to the el-choshen, he doesn't even bother calling it el-choshen, he just calls it judgment. It's no longer as it was divided in the heart, it's really divided. In the heart, things are divided and still connected. In the shoulder plaids, where you had 6 over here and 6 over here, you have the names of each shevet, but they're not separated. In the mishpat, they're separated. Like in the taka, over here, they weren't separated. Theoretically, they were separated. Actually, you could see them on 12 separated stones. Okay, skip 2 lines. The breastplate was folded in double. Urim V'Tumim shmurim Ebenezer's position. Inside the fold, they kept the Urim V'Tumim till they would be needed. Right? We hold, you put them inside the breastplate and never took them out. Because they were like a battery which had formed a miracle, not Ebenezer. No. They were a mechanism to achieve nevuah. The Kohen Godol, besides everything else, was destined to be a navi and to help the Jewish people with prognostication for future. Some of the Mepharshim say, but the near future as opposed to the distant future. So when he needed it, it was basically a folder. He took it out, he put it in front of him, he meditated, he transcended, became a prophet. Then they would be removed from inside the breastplate, and he would use it for a mechanism of prophecy. The way the names of the Shvatim appear on the stones on his shoulders, there's a certain unity, cohesiveness. As opposed to the stones of the chest plate, the shoulder pads were just to remember, and when you remember everybody as one. But el-mishpat bney-Yisra'el, the discerning, the judging, the separating one Jew from the next, and judging each one individually, was al-lev. Okay? Now, so has he said a single word about what I told you about this business of meditation? Devayla gornisht. Now, omilas urim, megzeras chamesi re'isi. It's the same root of the word chamesi re'isi. Chamesi means I saw in Aramaic. I saw light. I'm looking for light, if you will. vTumim shem tmimim, they're whole. V'ha'urim, loy ha'tumim, za'ava kesevayu. What does that word loy mean? I don't have a clue. But the Urim V'Tumim were made from gold and silver. V'ha'misper yedua berayes gemures. And I think this word means that there's a gematria in Urim V'Tumim which proves clearly that the Urim V'Tumim had upon themselves mehayu v'hashafel, a higher world and a lower world. You see how cryptic that is? How vague that is? That you could figure out by a mispar, by some kind of a gematria, that the Urim V'Tumim had a higher world and a lower world. And the whole idea was you went from the Tumim, which was a lower level, to the Turim, which is a higher level. You transcended, and you were keli for nevuah. And there were many koyanim who had aphids, and along with aphids, they had Tumim. They had the belt, and I guess that means the power to do this meditation, to achieve some kind of level of prophecy. There was no choshen, there was no urim, but they had ephod and they had tumim. You see? You understand? Now, you're wondering how I figured this all out, because the Ramban explains the Rabbi Ebenezer very clearly, as does the Ralbag. Vasher hayu ragel david b'yorim v'tumim shahayu al-choshen hamishpat yuchal lahashel l'shel midimyan ha'ephod levade. A person who was spiritually sensitized, that he would be able to use the combination of Urim and Tumim to become a Navi, on occasion the Tumim would suffice, the Ephod without the Choshen would suffice. That's it. That's all he says. That's all. Okay? Now, let's jump to the Ralbag. I printed tons of Ralbag. It's right after the Chumash. Last paragraph, page 9. Right there on the right. Urim V'Tumim ha'imidim ha'nevuah. Urim V'Tumim. The Ralbag. Urim V'Tumim ha'imidim Me'idim hanavua. What does the word me'idim mean? They aroused prophecy. They woke up prophecy. You see how he describes it? Not it was a battery for revelation. It was a mechanism. In other words, according to the Ezra and the Ralbag, the Kohen Godol had to work a lot harder than we imagined. We thought Urim V'Tumim, he would stand there, people stood behind him, and the voice would come. No, he had to do all this meditation. The Ramban doesn't agree with this. Ramban holds like Rashi about the Urim V'Tumim. If the Kohen was worthy, he would meditate upon them. bney-Yisra'el That's why it says he carried the judgment, meaning to say the possibility of being able to be a prophecy for the Jewish people. The names written on the stones of the breastplate themselves, in other words, Reuven, Shimon, Levi, which written on the stones, were a first cause v'Yisra'el, that the mind of the Kohen should start wandering into the deepest depths of the Jewish people. In other words, the stones on the outside had names. They were a provocation. They were telling the Kohen, "Nu, move, rise." They were the names of the Yidden. And the Yidden are the lowest levels. But the names of the Yidden encouraged him to go to the next level, which was Tumim. And the images of the Tumim made him rise to the next level still, which is Urim. And from Urim he became Navi. Stayst? Interessant. On the one hand, it's so unholy. On the other hand, it's so avoided. The Kohen Godol got schwitzen out of it. Urim V'Tumim wasn't a party. Urim V'Tumim Urim V'Tumim were a motivation to reach Misad his banyanuse, because what the Urim V'Tumim provoked was a meditation in the essence of the first cause. In other words, to transcend, as I described it to you before. He is baited. Sorry?
So there was no instant answers.
No such thing. Right. It was an avoider. The Rebbe has a sikh at the back based on the Ramban, where the Rebbe says there's two inyanim in a Kohen. One was a Ovid Alakim, and the other was a Navi. Not every Kohen had both.
So how did they used to go to, there was people going to the Kohen?
Yeah. He would isolate himself. He would transcend from the remaining faculties. That this separation, this transcendence of his regular faculties is is a cause to reach prophecy, which is prefaced by his mind wandering into the transcendent and into the unknown. Okay? And that's enough. That's enough. And he, of course, says, Moshe Rabbeinu prepared the Urim V'Tumim. Moshe Rabbeinu put it into the el-choshen, because it wasn't a garment. It was something very uncommon. Only Moshe was an expert at it. Moshe Rabbeinu prepared it, and he gave it to the Kohen Godol. Top of page 9. Test. Since it was all about arousing prophecy, since it was about prophecy, they wouldn't ask Urim V'Tumim only to a priest, in which Ruach HaKodesh rested. You see? Since the first step of his meditation towards the transcendent was by meditating about Klal Yisrael as a whole, they only asked the Kohen encompassing basic general issues. Right? Now, I would say nothing. Okay, fine. Now, you say I made an aleph, and then I made a beis, and the next page I made a gimel. This aleph, beis, and gimel are three different interpretations of Urim V'Tumim. In the first one, Urim means the element of fire. And Tumim means the beginning of the cohesion of fire, wind, water, and earth into final creations. In the second interpretation, Urim means theoretical heat. And Tumim means the development of forms. And I would propose that now forms means the four elements as opposed to just the element of fire. And the third interpretation is Urim goes on the stars, and Tumim goes on the heavenly bodies that are less than the stars. Okay? Again, I'm not reading them for you, but I'm telling you what it says. The first level of Urim V'Tumim is the lowest pshat. The second level of V'Tumim, in other words, the first level of Urim V'Tumim, Urim is, you say the Eish and Tumim is all four elements together. In the second interpretation, Urim is Eish and Tumim, I think, is Ruach Mayim and Afar. And in the third one, it's the heavenly bodies, which is the Chalo elements, according to the Chaykim. The stars and what's less than the stars. The point is, it was a meditative process. And you first meditated Tumim, then you meditated Urim, because Urim was beyond it, and it was closer to the prophecy itself. You follow? It's consistent a little bit with last week's discussion about the two Kruvim. Remember we discussed Kruvim? And he brings a lot of fancy, nice words. Enough. Okay? Yes? Okay, now, let's go back to the Ramban for a little bit. Just have to flip over your packet. You don't have to change pages. Because of the Ramban writes. You see where I made the arrow? Lamed. Sava Rabbi Avraham. You see I sort of erased it a little bit?
Yeah, all right. Yeah.
Sava Rabbi Avraham, L'Yischakem bin Urim V'Tumim. He gets all carried away with the Urim V'Tumim. Skip one line, okay? V'herech bin Yonim, and he elaborates, Ki Choshev Shehem al Tzures. They're on forms, Sheyasu Bala Gechavim, similar to what people who worshipped stars did, Ladas Machshavas HaShayel, to know the thought of the one who's requesting it. The evidence didn't say anything of the sort. Ramban is reading into the Ezra the concept of Gestalt, of form. But Ramban says nonsense. Now, yes, Ezra does suggest, I interpret the Ezra for you, remember? Yes? The interpretation that I gave based on this, when I read the Ralbag, I said, that's what Ezra means. Ezra is cryptic. It's Kulei Remes. But there's a fundamental difference when the Ezra says when the Ramban reads it. The Ramban reads it as though he's talking to the stars. Ezra reads it that the stars are a stepping stone, are a catalyst to beyond. You understand? Ramban has no tolerance for this from form to formless. There's a God and that's it. Don't give me mices with angels. Once you have Sfiras, who needs angels? But that's how the Ezra says it. When you read the Ezra and the Ralbag especially, you realize as much as this is controversial, it's not consistent with the Halacha, not consistent with the Ramban, not consistent with Rashi, but you hear the Avodas Hashem in it. You hear Achdus in what they're saying. And then he brings Rashi, and he goes into a whole arichas. He basically agrees with Rashi. End of story. Okay? Sure. Now, there's a Rabbeinu Bechaya who repeats the Ramban and explains it nicely. We don't have time for the Rabbeinu Bechaya. There's a Rekanti who quotes the Ramban verbatim. So we're not doing that. But I want to show you one line of Rekanti. And I find this fascinating. Before you turn your pages, please, there's a Balaturim. There's a Balaturim. There's no page number here. Just the page where we just read the Ramban, you see a Balaturim? The page right before the Ralbag. Esa Urim v'Tumim b'gematria Shem ben Shivim Shtayim. Esa Urim v'Esa Tumim is the numerical equivalency of Shem ben Shivim Shtayim, the name Ab. Okay? You'll see later on in Arizal that Tumim are Ab. Urim are Mab. But he says both together, Esa Urim, Esa Tumim, Shem Ab. Okay? Now, go to the country. Okay? Now, I'm doing this just to show you the evolution of Torah. Gematria? Together, Esa Urim, the Esa Tumim is Gematria, Shem ben Shivim Shtayim. It's a high number. It's well over 1,000. Okay? Go to the Rekanti. Tuf Pei Aleph.
1 second. Gematria Shem ban.
Ab, Ayin Beis. Shivim. All together. Shem ben Shivim Shtayim. All four words.
Ban.
Not ban, ben Shivim Shtayim. That has 27 children.
Shem ben
Shivim Shtayim. Right. That's how it's discussed in the Rishon. Now go to the Rekanti. There we are. You see where I made my left side of the page, where I wrote Rekeach, right? Who's Rabbi Yezazal? Rabbi Rekeach. From the Mekubal, from Chachmei, from the Hasidic Ashkenaz. Yes? Esa Urim Esa Tum Begematria Shem ben Shivim Shtayim. Here's my proposal. The Balaturim never saw Nish the Rekeach, Nish the Rekanti, Nish the Rekeach. And you come to them allein. You understand? It's just one of those things.
Where's it? I'm sorry. Where's it?
Where I made the word rekech, I wrote the word rekech on the margin. Right there, yeah. Same exact words. B'shem Harav Eliezer. Eliezer's the rekeach. As for Urim V'Tumim, Gematria Shem Ben Shem Mushtaim. Very interesting. But they say that Urim and Tumim together are one Shem, Ab. Correct? Right? Have now the rest of the pamphlets in Arizal, a Tzemach Tzedek from Sefer al-Likutim. I allowed myself to be cheap this time. And a Likutei Sichos. The Likutei Sichos I'm not going to learn it all. It's a Ramban Sicha. It's very, very interesting. It doesn't delve into Urim V'Tumim. Well, I'll tell you what I'm going to do right now. Instead of reading, I'm going to talk. I'm going to tell you a gedank. I'll tell you a thought. After I discuss the idea, Arizal is saying more or less the same thing as the Tzemach Tzedek. You have to believe that Tzemach Tzedek is adding something, because Chassidus is not just repeating Kabbalah. But I'm not sure what he's adding. Okay? I'm going to give you a thought, and I want you to think about this. I want you to think about this. And I'm going to begin with a totally unrelated idea. I just showed you in the Balaturim and the Rekanti that Esa Urim Tumim equals Shem Ben Shem Mushtaim. Is one name, Ab. The Arizal says that Urim Tumim are Mab and Ab. You see? Page Kuf Peches at the bottom. I made the arrow. Shem Mab and Shem Ab. Urim are Shem Mab and Tumim are Shem Ab. Hayu Shem at the bottom of the first column. Yeah? There's a whole bunch of Kabbalah here. Leah, Rachel, Shachas Hazokim. On the bottom of the page he says Mab and Ab and so forth. He brings the same thing that Ezra and that Ralbag bring about other people wearing ephods as well. This is Sefer al-Likutim. I looked at Likutei Torah. It's Bekitzer. This is a Likut from a lot of places. It looks like it's from the Chavedim also. It's not just from Rabbi Chaim Vital. But I'm going to start with a totally different issue. Okay? In other words, forget the text for a moment. Forget it. And you'll see, amongst other things, what the Ezra says about the ephod being machshava and the el-choshen being mishpat, how you see a convergence between Kabbalah and Ezra. I'm telling you, Ezra was a big mokobel. He was no chayker. He was hiding. I give you Abdullah. We learn Chassidus. And sometimes they come across Kabbalistic ideas and we say next, don't bother me. Sometimes you'll find a mime that actually explains these Kabbalistic ideas. One of the issues which is discussed at length in the Ayin Beis, it's not discussed so much in other Sfarim, that most people don't say, next to who, it's Kabbalistic, it's gibberish, you have to have, a map, names and places, you have Kabbalistic language. Is that there are three concepts discussed regarding Ak, Adam Kadmon, the first world. They are Einayim of Ak, the eyes of Ak, Achap, Aleph Ches Pei, Oizer Chotem Peh, ear, nose, and throat. That's it. Yeah, Achap, Oizen, Chotem Peh. That's where the source of it comes. Everything was there. And Metzach, the forehead. Now, Einayim of Ak is another situation. The eyes, the eyes reveal the essence. The eyes are a window into the soul. To be sure, there's a downside to the eyes, but they're out of the ballpark. They're in a different category. But the Metzach and the Achap. What's the difference between the ears, the nose, and the mouth and the forehead? The obvious difference is that these are orifices, these are openings. And every opening is for Knisa v'Yitziyah, in and out. So the concept is that Achap of Ak reveal light. The nose of Ak, the mouth of Ak, the ears of Ak reveal godliness, and reveal it in a way that the world below actually receives something that they can interpret, that they can process and then interpret. What is the forehead? Covers. Doesn't reveal anything. But there's a flip side to it. And the flip side to it is Chochmas Adam Torah Ponav. The essence of a person is on his face. On one side, it's a no-brainer to say that The eyes, the ears, forget the eyes. The eyes are in a different category. The ears, the nose, and the mouth reveal. The Metzach hides. On the other hand, there's a certain light on the Metzach. It's called in Kabbalah Maha Chadoshim. It's not the regular Mah, it's called the new Mah. That's Beikeah. It has to burst through the skull, and it's rooted in Ab. It's the lowest name, because it has to come through the skull, Maha Chadoshim, but it's rooted in Ab. There's an argument that says that on the forehead you have the essence of the person. The mystical ears, nose, and mouth reveal lights, processable lights. The forehead reveals nothing and reveals an essence, an unprocessable, something you cannot translate. It's just the essence. You either got it or you don't. Achap and Netzach come into Hishtalshalos. So it says that the distinction between Toyu and Tikkun is that there's no Metzach in Toyu. There's plenty of Achap in Toyu. There's more Achap in Toyu than in Tikkun. In terms of processable lights which are revealed and translated, Toyu is higher than Tikkun. But Metzach, the forehead, which reveals nothing, but represents the humility, essence bittul, doesn't exist in Toyu, only in Tikkun. And that's why Tikkun is the real place of Kedusha. And Toyu, with all of its loudness and its demonstrativeness and its expressiveness, becomes klipa because it doesn't have essence. So how do we view the relationship between Netzach and Achap? Which is higher, which is lower? In terms of Giluim, in terms of conscious experience, Achap is an idea. You can learn it, you can understand it, you can talk about it, you can feel it, you can sense it. Netzach is nothing. What's there to explain? It's simple. On the other hand, there's the truth of the Eibishter there. You understand? You get it? Yeah? Yeah? Achap and Netzach are Urim V'Tumim. And it's consistent with Rashi. It's consistent brilliantly with the Ezra. You see Mamish Achdus and Torah here, unbelievably. Lezikarin, mishpat. Machshava, mishpat. Everything fits. The el-choshen and mishpat were Urim, lights. Achap, lights. Revealed specific aspects. The other word for the el-choshen and mishpat is mishpat. Dissect, break up, analyze, judge, process, internalize. But there's an element of tzimtzum in that entire process. The ephod was worn on the back. The back, oirif, has no distinguishing characteristics. The el-choshen is worn on the front. Which is better, the front or the back? Of course the front is better than the back. But every front has a back that came before it. You know the muscle from the Schwindeltrip. You have a spiral staircase. When you're halfway up to the next flight, your back is to the door. So the back of the way up to the higher story is higher than the front of the story below. Right? Why? Because there's an advantage to know distinction. There's an advantage to know discernible details. Metzach, etzem, is in the back. That's why the ephod is worn on the back, because the ephod represents a place of no distinction. But the no distinction of the ephod is called tumim. Wholeness, simplicity, no detail. And there is something atzmiistic about this back. Dafke with the acher, oirif, where there's no detail. But there's essence in no detail. There's essence in Metzach. Now, I'm not saying that Metzach and Achap are el-choshen and ephod. It doesn't say that. I'm saying that there are mashal for el-choshen and ephod. You understand? So, the Ezra of all people, Mamish is saying, Reina Kabbalah, he says what the Kisra Arizal says. That the ephod, and if you read those words of the Ezra, he seems like he's jumping around. He starts subject. He says the ephod had two stones. Everything was unified. It goes on machshava, zikaron. It's higher than distinction. The el-choshen is mishpat. It's discerning, it's dissecting, it's breaking apart. Urim V'Tumim. So Urim is lower than Tumim according to Kabbalah. Not higher than Urim V'Tumim. Urim is lower. And Kabbalistically it's Mab and Ab. Mab is a shame of Gevurah. And in this case it's the Gevurah of Chochmah. To discern, to judge, to separate. And Mab is shame of Gevurah. Yeah, Ana B'Cheach, you do it to Michel, shame Mab is Gevurah. It's a shame of Aliyah. You know why it's a shame of Gevurah? because it's 7 times 6, not 7 times 7. You're missing Malchus. 7 times 7, 49 is Malchus is the Gilui. 42 is 7 times 6. Abag Yitatz. Ana B'chayach has 42 words. It's a shame of Gevurah. So this is what that is.
The question is Urim.
That's right. And the Ephod is Tumim. And in terms of Giluyim, Ephod is the back. Tumim is simple. It's lower than the choshen. But there's etzem in Ephod. There's etzem in Tumim. Not in Urim, not in the choshen. This is unbelievable. It's so gorgeous. What's so beautiful about it is that the Arizal says it's masim with the Rashi. It's masim with the Yinks Menazil. It's masim with Even Ezra. Was liegt an Even Ezra? Was liegt an? So they in the Kabbalah. 12 stones that shows on division.
That's mapar.
Achap. It's al derech achap. Distinguished lights, processable lights, lights you're going to put in vessels. Attach words to them. Yeah. And you connect it to Leah and Rachel also. Leah and Rachel. That's what? That the Ephod is Leah, and that the choshen is Rachel. Rachel is lower than Leah. Rachel is lower than Leah. But Leah is a level which is, in other words, it's
Ephod is Rachel.
The Ephod is Leah. And the choshen is Rachel.
But Rachel is
lower than Leah. And the idea is that Rachel represents separation, distinction, and Leah, he calls it Amad Eskasi, behalf. And you know, with this background, you could read most of this Kisvei Ari. You shouldn't have much trouble with it. The bottom of Kupei Zayin, Kupei Ches, you can read the top. Where I made the arrow at the bottom, you should have no trouble. And the Tzemach Tzedek says the same thing. Tzemach Tzedek in Pashta says the same thing. I printed Sefer al-Kutim. The next page. And I was generous enough to underline Urim and underline Tumim and to make a line in the text where he finishes his discussion on Urim and begins his discussion on Tumim. You know what he says? Gavaldik over here. Tzemach Tzedek has a whole new Reichkeit. Basically what he says is Urim is Giluyim and Tumim is Atzmos. And he connects it to Shaul and David. He says Shaul was a king, but his kingship could have been overturned. The fact that he was a Melech could have been changed. David the Melech, Shaul was a king. Shaul is the Madreg of Urim. And there was a possibility that his kingship would be overturned. Because in Ishtal says there could be Shinuim. David the Melech is lower than Shaul. Yeah. But David the Melech is Malchus. The Shadish of Malchus is Anathmas, is Tumim. And he explains that David comes from Shaul. You have to come from Giloyim to Atzmos, from Urim to Tumim. But once you add Tumim to Urim, it can never change. He says on the next shikele, Tumecho v'urechol ish chasidecha. Chasidecha is Urim. It's Giloyim. Tumecha, he says, is the madrega of Tshuva, the transcendence of Urim. It's a very geschmack. It's a very geschmack. Hafachba v'hafachba the kulaba. Okay.